Thank you for joining RPRA this morning for our consultation webinar, where we will be reviewing the proposed use of Ontario Electronic Stewardship residual funds to offset RRCEA program fees for ITT AV producers. So my name is Michelle Hoover, and I am one of the communications advisors at RPRA, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. And then my colleague Cameron Perrick, who is the manager of programs and stakeholder relations, he will be hosting today's webinar and will introduce himself in just a moment. And then behind the scenes, we have Davina Goundin, who is our communications coordinator, and she is helping us with the presentation slides today. Next slide, please. So we will be answering your questions today and asking for feedback on the proposal that we will be presenting. We ask that you please tailor your questions to the subject matter. And to ask a question, simply click on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, type in your question and click send. There's also an upvote feature that allows you to bump up someone else's question to the top of our queue. And this can be valuable if you wanted to ask the same question or if you are interested in hearing the answer. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please let us know by using the chat function rather than the Q&A, and we will do our best to support you. And we have also enabled the live transcript feature that transcribes speech to text on the bottom of your screen. And finally, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded after today's session to our consultation webpage, as well as the presentation slides, so you can go back and review them before submitting your feedback to us. Next slide, please. Okay, so today's agenda. We will be reviewing the purpose of this consultation and provide some background information as well. We'll then review the proposed application of OES residual funds. After that, we'll ask the consultation questions we are seeking feedback on and also open the floor to questions in general. And finally, we'll provide a summary and next steps of the consultation. Next slide, please. Okay, so the purpose of the consultation is to provide you with an overview of the framework for managing OES residual funds. We're also seeking feedback on RPRA's proposed approach to applying OES residual funds to offset 2023 RRCEA program fees for ITT AV producers. And just to be clear, RRCEA program fees are charges that obligated producers are required to pay to RPRA every year to recover its operational costs, including costs related to building and operating the registry, providing services to registrants, and compliance and enforcement activities. And we're also going to be looking for feedback on the proposal, and that is going to be due by Friday, September 2nd. And a few items that are out of scope for this consultation and that we please ask to hold off on asking questions on is RRCEA program fees for 2023. This will be consulted on later this year, and you'll have an opportunity then to ask questions, as well as Environmental Protection Act program fees for 2023. And with that, I will hand it over to Cam to begin.
Morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our session today. I'm going to go through a quick backgrounder on the progress towards winding up OES. So if we can go to the next slide. So in February 2018, the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks directed the WE program to be wound up. OES was required to submit a wind-up plan to RPRA, which was approved with conditions in August of 2019. And the WE program ceased operations on December 31st, 2020, and transitioned over to the ITT AV program under the RRCEA piece of legislation. The board of directors of OES then resigned and appointed Deloitte Restructuring Incorporated as the liquidator of OES, and this was effective as of April 1, 2021. Next slide, please. So the final windup of OES is dependent on the resolution of a claim the OES liquidator filed with the CRA for a refund of $3.5 million in sales taxes remitted during the time steward fees were reduced to zero, aka the fee elimination period. So this fee elimination period was a result of the effort to draw down the remaining program surplus ahead of the WE program's wind up on December 31st, 2020. As reported by OES in the 2021 annual report, the amount of remaining reserve funds as of year-end 2021 is $3.4 million. The liquidator of OES has indicated that they're able to make $780,000 of the remaining reserves, also referred to as the residual funds, available for transfer to RPRA in 2023 as an interim step ahead of the resolution of the CRA claim and the final liquidation of OES. Next slide, please. So the OES windup plan states that residual funds remaining in OES after windup activities are completed will be transferred to RPRA to offset our RRCEA registry-related expenses. Now, this element of the windup plan was consulted on by OES as part of the windup plan, their windup plan proposal during October 2018 to November 2018. RPRA then approved the windup plan with conditions on August 20th, 2019, and those conditions included that OES would cooperate with RPRA in consulting with stakeholders on additional details about the transfer of residual funds to RPRA and how the funds will be used. So RPRA did consult on the OES windup plan between March and April in 2019, and RPRA amended its consultation on the OES windup plan to consult specifically on surplus funds as directed by the minister. We're just highlighting that this element is not new, and that hopefully folks are quite familiar with the plan to manage remaining program residual funds once OES is ready to be wound down completely. Next slide, please. So following its appointment, the liquidator, so Deloitte, identified a need to amend the OES steward rules to address the payment of fees, to align the rules with the obligation to transfer residual funds to RPRA as required by the wind-up plan. The liquidator did consult on these steward rule changes between May 7th, 2021 and May 25th, 2021, and RPRA's board approved the amended steward rules in June of 2021. The steward rules were amended to add section 4.7 that nothing in these rules shall prevent the distribution of residual funds to RPRA consistent with a wind-up plan approved under section 14 of the WDTA. Within the liquidator's consultation deck, they also alluded to the opportunity to make an interim transfer of residual funds to RPRA. Next slide, please. So we're going to pause here to see if anyone has questions about the windup of OES, the status of the CRA claim, or any of the process ahead of the point in time today. And just to head off some questions about CRA, the resolution of the OES liquidator's claim with the CRA, the date of resolution is unknown. So we're not able to speak to when we anticipate that the claim will be resolved, and therefore OES as an IFO would be wound up. Just taking a look, there's no questions in the queue right now, and that's okay. We'll pause for another round of questions near the end of the presentation. How does this affect producers? I'm gonna just thanks for the question. I'm gonna park this one to the end because we haven't really got into the impact on ITT-AV producers yet. But when we talk about how we plan to apply the transferred interim amount and the final amount of residual funds following the resolution of the CRA claim, there will be an impact on producers, and we can discuss that in detail in the next few slides. So hopefully, if that's okay, if I park that question for now. So This is the proposal that RPRA is consulting on as it relates to the application of OES residual funds. So OES residual funds transferred to RPRA will be used to offset RRCEA registry-related expenses. To clarify, the registry is an online platform that allows the authority to securely and confidently collect information from obligated parties and monitor performance. As an administrative authority of the Government of Ontario, RPRA does not receive any government funding and funds its operations through fees charged to regulated parties on a cost recovery basis. Next slide, please. The OES residual funds will be used. So we're talking about the interim transfer that we've alluded to, or that we've mentioned. OES residual funds will be used to offset 2023 fee rates charged to ITTAV producers obligated under the Electrical and Electronic Equipment Regulation under the RRCEA. This will temporarily lower the fee rates charged by RPRA to ITTAV producers only. The rate reduction will not apply to fees collected for batteries or lighting because these materials were not obligated under the legacy OES-WE program. And I know Michelle mentioned this off the top, but RPRA will conduct a separate consultation on all proposed 2023 RRCEA program fees in the fall of 2022. Next slide, please. So our methodology for application of the received residual funds. RPRA is seeking ITTAV stakeholder feedback on how we're going to apply 2 tranches of OES residual funds, which will be transferred to RPRA to offset RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers only. So the 2 separate tranches will be the interim residual funds transfer totaling $780,000 and applying these funds to the 2023 RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers. And then a final residual funds transfer and application, the total amount estimated to range between $2.5 and $6 million, dependent on the outcome of the CRA claim. The application and timing is also dependent on the resolution of the CRA claim and final liquidation of OES. So the range of 2.5 to 6 million is due to the uncertainty, that wide range of the amount that that CRA could rule in favor or not in favor of OES. Next slide, please. So RPRA's proposed methodology is guided by the following principles: that all OES residual funds will be applied to offset RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers only. Once transferred to RPRA, funds will be held in a separate low-risk interest-bearing account and will be reported on in RPRA's audited financial statements in its annual reports, and proposed fee reductions will be applied to provide fee predictability for ITTAV producers. Next slide, please. So this is related to the first transfer of funds, the interim residual funds. Prior to the resolution of the CRA claim, RPRA proposes the following: that OES must retain a prudent amount of residual funds as contingency due to the uncertain timing of the resolution of the CRA claim. That the liquidator determined that a portion of the residual funds are available for distribution prior to the resolution of the CRA claim, while ensuring that sufficient residual funds remain for contingency. It is expected that up to $780,000 may be transferred to RPRA on an interim basis. And an additional step, due to the fact that the liquidator is a court-appointed liquidator, the liquidator must seek a court order prior to transferring any funds to RPRA. And we will illustrate what the impact is on seeking the court order on the timing of this transfer in a later slide. If the GST-HST claim is successful, the refund awarded by CRA will be added to the residual funds or the remaining reserve that would be available to be transferred to RPRA following the wind up and corporate dissolution of OES. Next slide, please. So RPRA proposes to direct the liquidator to seek a court order for an interim transfer of funds in Q3 2022 and the following. The interim residual funds transferred to RPRA would be applied to the 2023 RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers only. The interim amount will be apportioned fairly between small producers and large producers, and the fee reduction is proposed to be calculated by dividing the interim amount by the total ITTAV tonnage for 2023 to calculate a per kilo discount for ITTAV producers. So this chart below is illustrative only, because we have not yet communicated to stakeholders what the ITTAV program allocation is. So these are illustrative numbers, but just give you an idea of what the fee rate discount could be. So if applied to the small producer flat fee, it would reduce the flat fee from a $75 RPRA fee down to a $57 flat fee for the small producer category, those supplying up to 6,360 kilos into the Ontario marketplace. And for large producers, it could result in a 1.4 cent reduction on your per kilo fee, reducing the fee from 6 cents down to 4.5 cents. And again, these are illustrative numbers only, but just communicating what the fee reduction could be. And obviously, we will not know what the fee reduction is until after our 2023 fee consultation and following the transfer of the funds, because the amount it could be 780,000. That's what we're anticipating, but nothing certain until cash is in hand. Next slide, please. The timing and total amount of the final residual funds available for transfer to RPRA after the final liquidation. So this is related to once the CRA claim has been resolved and the total remaining reserves are able to be transferred to RPRA. This would happen only after the resolution of the CRA claim. That OES final residual funds are proposed to be used to freeze the RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers, meaning that whatever rate is established in 2023, that this proposal proposes to create some fee predictability. And if a 1.4 cent fee reduction is established in 23, we're proposing to freeze the ITTAV producer fee rate at that level until the funds are exhausted. So the length of the rate freeze period is dependent on the amount of the final residual funds transferred to RPRA, which is estimated to range between 2.5 and 6 million. Next slide. So the following is how the final residual funds are proposed to be applied to the RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers. So the RRCEA program fees will continue to be determined following the general fee setting policy as required by law, and will be open for stakeholder comments as part of RPRA's 2023 annual fee consultation. The residual funds we applied to effectively freeze RRCEA program fees at the previous year's rate. The OES residual fund account will be drawn down each year to sustain the RRCEA program fee until the account is depleted. If the RRC program fee is lower than the previous year, the effective fee rate for the following year will be the lower fee rate. So if the cost allocation is reduced and the fee rate goes down to, say, instead of 4.5 cents to 4.3 cents, the OES residual fund account will be drawn down to maintain that lower rate until the account is exhausted. So just reiterating that the ITTAV producers would not experience a fee rate increase until the OES residual fund account is depleted. Next slide, please. Now, just communicating a timeline, and there are some uncertainties involved in this timeline, but here we are today near the end of August, consulting on the residual funds. We will be consulting on our 2023 fees in the fall, aiming to have the fees approved by our board in November, and following that approval, we would then signal to the OES liquidator that we'd like them to seek a court order to transfer the interim amount to RPRA, which could take 4 to 8 weeks. which gives adequate time to transfer the funds to RPRA to make them available for application to ITTAV fees to create that fee reduction when registration opens in April of 2023. Now, the remaining dates in this timeline in 2023 are indicating that we will once again consult on RRCEA program fees in the fall of 2024. And at some point in 2023 or 2024, the CRA claim could be resolved, at which point OES would take the final remaining steps to wind up and transfer any remaining residual funds to RPRA, which would be applied as per the proposal just discussed. So next slide, please. So we've got a few key questions that we're seeking stakeholder feedback on. However, this is a non-exhaustive list. If you have any questions you'd like to pose, this is the time to do it. But let me just run through some of the key questions that we're looking for your feedback on. So, do you support RPRA requesting the transfer of interim residual funds from the OES liquidator to offset 2023 RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers? Once the CRA claim is resolved, do you support the proposal to apply the final residual funds transferred to RPRA to effectively freeze RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers at the previous year's rate until the funds are exhausted? As an ITTAV producer, how important is a predictable fee rate to you? Or would you prefer the final residual funds to be applied to reduce the RRCEA program fees for ITTAV producers to zero until the funds are exhausted? There's some sample questions, but I'll take a pause here, and if anyone has additional questions, we'd love to hear your feedback.
Just a reminder that if you require some more time to think about the answers to these questions, we are accepting feedback until September 2nd, and feedback can be emailed to us at consultations@rpra.ca. So please don't feel like you have to provide your feedback right now. There is an opportunity to email it to us as well. So we do have one question, Cam. For the final residual funds, have we considered returning the funds directly to the stewards that remitted these funds? This person's suggesting that it could be divided proportionally based on steward's share of the last OES year with fees or average of the last 3 years. And they're saying that this is more similar to what was done for tires.
Thanks for that question. This is all driven by the requirements of the wind-up plan. So related to the tires program, the minister directed that fees be returned directly to stewards. And therefore, the wind-up plan was drafted in such a way that process needed to be followed. For this particular program, the WE program and OES's wind-up plan, the wind-up plan that was consulted upon by both OES and RPRA proposed that the remaining residual funds would be transferred to RPRA to offset registry-related fees for ITTAV producers, and that's what that we're implementing today.
Thanks, Cam. We'll just wait a few more minutes to see if anyone else has any questions. And then also to the person who asked at the beginning how this affects producers, if you are still unclear of that, please feel free to ask that again and we can clarify for you. So we'll just move forward. If you do have questions, there's still a few minutes left. So, okay, we just received some feedback, so thank you. We will take that offline and keep that in mind when we are gathering all our feedback for the consultation. So thank you for submitting that now. If we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so before we move forward to the next steps in the summary, we will be launching just a very quick poll to gather your feedback on today's webinar. This gives us a good understanding of how helpful this webinar was, as well as highlight any ways that we can enhance our approach. So we will launch the poll now, and we appreciate your participation. Okay, well, thank you to everyone who just submitted some feedback to us. We appreciate it. Next slide, please.
So I'll just do a quick summary of the key elements of the proposal. So the OES residual funds remaining after the program wind-up will be used to offset registry-related costs. The transfer of the residual funds to RPRA is consistent with the direction set out in the OES wind-up plan. OES steward rules were amended in June 2021 to allow for the residual funds to be used to offset the cost borne by ITT producers under the RRCEA. The second key element is that RPRA will maintain transparency and fairness in applying the residual funds to registry fees. That OES funds will be held in a separate account, which will be included in RPRA's financial audit and annual report. That OES funds will only be applied to fees charged to ITT producers under the E regulation. That fees charged to battery and lighting producers will not be offset by OES residual funds. That OES residual funds will be used to reduce and temporarily freeze RRCEA program fee rates for ITT producers and support fee predictability. Next slide, please. In terms of the interim residual funds transfer and application, that RPRA proposes to request that the OES liquidator transfer an interim amount of OES residual funds to RPRA, and that funds received by Q1 2023 will be used to fully offset the 2023 registry fee rates for ITT producers. And then related to our final residual funds application, OES residual funds will be used to freeze effective ITT registry fee rates at the level applicable in that year until the funds are exhausted. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Cam. Okay, so our next step. So we encourage you to provide your feedback on the proposal by emailing it to consultations@rpra.ca. Thank you to the two individuals who already submitted their feedback. We will take that offline. To review the consultation materials, so that's the slides from today, as well as the webinar recording, you can visit our consultation webpage. They will be uploaded this afternoon or early tomorrow, and a communication will also be sent to everyone who registered for this webinar with those materials as well. Again, the deadline to submit feedback is September 2nd. And if you require any more background information, please visit the WE Program Windup webpage, which is linked in this consultation deck. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for joining today.